Hey everyone! So today I want to show you a recipe for Kolackys. They're basically a European cookie with a butter pastry on the outside and traditionally a fruit jam on the inside. So to start off, you'll need 3 ounces of cream cheese and half a cup of butter. These have been sitting out at room temperature for a few hours, so they're a little bit soft. And you basically just want to add them to your bowl and mix until smooth. So what you'll be left with is this pale yellow mixture, and this is why it's really important that your 2 fats be at room temperature, because if they're not, then it's going to be hard to mix and you're going to have a lumpy mess. Next, we're going to be measuring out 1 cup of flour, and here's a tip. With your ingredients, when you're measuring them out, it's always best to either weigh them or spoon it in like I'm doing here. For example, if I was just going to go straight into the container with my measuring cup with this flour, it would get really compressed and condensed, and then I would end up with a lot more flour than I intended. So we can go ahead and start mixing in our flour slowly. I usually do half of it at a time. Eventually your dough will start coming together enough as to where you can start mixing it with your hands. So at this point we can tip out our dough onto a floured surface and form it into a ball. This dough is very easy to work with, it's very soft, but it's also slightly sticky, so if at any point you feel like it's sticking to your hands too much, don't be afraid to add a little bit of flour and just keep mixing. After a few minutes, you'll end up with a ball of dough just like this. At this point, we can go ahead and wrap it in some saran wrap, or just put it in a bowl and make sure it's covered. But at this point we're going to let it sit and rest for a few hours or overnight in the refrigerator. After our dough has been chilled, we can start to roll it out on a floured surface. So you want to roll out your dough until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. And now we can start actually cutting out our cookies. I just have a 2 inch by 2 inch square cookie cutter that I'm going to be using. For my Kolacky cookies, I'm going to be using a raspberry pastry filling from the brand Solo. You can actually just buy this at the store. I've been using it since I was young and I keep going back to it because I just think it tastes the best. So now we can move on to forming our cookies, and here I'm just taking half a teaspoon of that raspberry filling and placing it right in the middle of the pastry, and then just spreading that out so that it's even throughout the middle. With these cookies, you kind of have to find a balance with how much filling you're adding, because if you add too much, then you risk having the cookies burst open while they're baking in the oven, but if you add too little, then you risk not having the flavor coming through. So you kind of just have to find a good middle ground. Once you've gotten your filling how you want it, you can take the other 2 corners of the pastry and fold them onto each other. I like to kind of push the tip down of the pastry in the corner, and then sometimes add a little bit of water just to prevent it opening when it's baking. And then just keep repeating this process with the rest of your pastry. I was able to get about 30 cookies with this recipe, but I've seen in the past people making larger batches of these cookies, so if you want to double it, then there's no harm in doing that. Now you can add all of your cookies onto a non-stick baking sheet, and this is going to go into a preheated oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 15 minutes. When you pull them out of the oven, you can see that some of them have burst open slightly, but don't worry about that. You can just go ahead and push the corners down if you want to, or as they're cooling, they tend to fall back on themselves into the original form. Once they've cooled down enough, you can move them from the wire rack onto a serving plate, and then go ahead and sprinkle, or in my case dump, powdered sugar onto the top of the cookies. When I was younger, my mom would make these for me around the holiday season, so these cookies will always have a special place in my heart. These cookies only take 5 ingredients, and so they're super easy. I hope you guys make them and let me know how they come out below. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoy.